Acupuncture is one of the most pervasive forms of alternative medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM. Its origin dates back to at least over 2,000 years ago in China and has grown in popularity throughout the Western world and East Asia in the last half-century or so. Traditional acupuncture posits that a life force, or qi, circulates through the body in lines called meridians, though many modern practitioners have dropped this and pseudo-scientific baggage. Still, the practice involves inserting needles into so-called acupuncture points, usually to treat pain. There is no demonstrated mechanism for how acupuncture is supposed to work exactly, but it's still possible that it could work through some undetermined mechanism. Therefore, let's turn to the scientific literature and see if we can assess acupuncture's efficacy. To be frank, the literature on acupuncture is a convoluted mess. A search on Google Scholar and/or PubMed reveals thousands of individual studies that have been published and dozens of meta-analyses and systematic reviews. Edzard Ernst, the leading scientist who we met in the last video, who attempts to rigorously study many alternative medicine modalities, notes how inconsistent, inconclusive, and unconvincing the findings have been that acupuncture is effective for anything. For non-pharmaceutical interventions, it can be a challenge to develop a suitable placebo control. How do you fake giving a treatment to patients without them being aware that they are getting the fake treatment? Well, for acupuncture, a few methods have been developed, often called sham acupuncture. The most common include 1. Non-penetrating needles, or 2. Inserting needles at so-called non-acupuncture points. Since acupuncture is quite an elaborate procedure, the absence of a placebo control almost certainly guarantees that the so-called measurable effect will be mostly placebo and non-specific effects. So let's focus only on the studies that included suitable placebo or sham acupuncture controls. Indeed, a review of the most well-designed studies, blinded, placebo-controlled, randomized controlled trials, and meta-analyses of these indicate that either acupuncture works no better than sham acupuncture or that the benefit is clinically irrelevant. In fact, there are so many meta-analyses and systematic reviews that there are now systematic reviews of systematic reviews, all of which concluded that acupuncture demonstrates no benefit beyond sham acupuncture. However, some meta-analyses have produced positive results, so it may be instructive to look at one of these to see if we can make sense of the discrepant results. Vickers et al., the authors interpreted their findings as, quote, suggesting that the total effects of acupuncture as experienced by the patient in routine clinical practice are clinically relevant, end quote. Should we accept this interpretation? A few points worth considering. The authors state in their limitations section about the lack of double blinding in most of the trials. Providers knew whether they were dishing out real or sham acupuncture. The authors state that the risk of bias from this is low. This is certainly arguable. While it is questionable that acupuncture can be successfully double-blinded, it is very possible, arguably highly likely, that this lack of double blinding will lead to an erroneous result. That whatever small effect occurs from acupuncture compared to sham acupuncture is a placebo effect. Second, the authors surmise, quote, to give an example of what these effect sizes mean in real terms, baseline pain score on a 0 to 100 scale for a typical trial might be 60. Given a standard deviation of 25, follow-up scores might be 43 in a no acupuncture group, 35 in sham acupuncture, and 30 in patients receiving true acupuncture, end quote. This is equivalent to 30%, 42%, and 50% pain reductions, respectively. First, these numbers seem overly large. With such a large standard deviation, a substantial proportion of subjects would have unrealistically low or high starting pain thresholds. Second, even if we accept the hypothetical numbers, the authors are arguing that a 5-point difference, from 35 to 30 out of 100, is humanly detectable, but this is almost certainly not the case, according to a literature review on the subject. Publication bias also appears to be a major issue and almost certainly explains the much higher degree of positive results reported in Asia. Likewise, these Asian studies with positive results tended to be of much lower methodological quality than Western studies, with issues relating to lack of proper blinding, randomization, and experimental control. particularly the studies published in Chinese journals. For these reasons, I think the results are more credibly interpreted as being in line with the prevailing conclusion in the literature, and that, as one paper put it, acupuncture is a theatrical placebo. What about the safety of acupuncture? Several reviews of the literature have documented harms arising due to improperly cleaned needles among poorly trained practitioners, which is a greater problem in Asia. Acupuncture enthusiasts might point out that its risks are much less than mainstream medicine, but as discussed previously, this ignores the risk versus benefit calculation. The evidence as a whole does not support any benefits from acupuncture, so any risks from acupuncture would obviously outweigh the benefits. While not being as obviously in conflict with biological plausibility and the laws of physics as homeopathy is, after thousands of studies, acupuncture has not been demonstrated to be effective for anything. The rational conclusion would be to retire this ancient, superstitious practice. So there's a tour of acupuncture. Next up, chiropractic.